The year is 1887. High on the southeast tower of the Yuma Territorial Prison, above a reservoir carved into the rock, sat a battery gun capable of firing roughly 300 rounds a minute. When a break erupted in the yard below, that gun opened up on the men rushing the gate. It was the most feared weapon this prison ever mounted, and by the time the territory became a state, almost no one remembered it was there. That gun is number 1. But it is far from alone. Number 2 was a pump-action shotgun the penitentiaries kept locked away, too brutal at close range to hand to just anyone. And number 1, the tower gun itself, sat rusting in the desert for decades before anyone realized what it had been. These are 20 guns that stood watch over the territory's most dangerous men, on the walls, the work gangs, and the gallows. And when the frontier died and the territories became states, nearly everyone was retired, sold off, or forgotten. Hit subscribe, because this list gets heavier the closer we get to number 1. Let's count them down. Number 20, the Remington rolling block. One of the strongest single-shot actions ever built, so simple a guard could learn it in an afternoon, so tough it armed soldiers on 4 continents. Thumb the hammer, roll the breech block open, drop in a cartridge, close it. 1 shot, then repeat. On a frontier prison budget, that simplicity was everything. It did not jam, and it did not cost much bought by the crate from military surplus. But the world was moving toward repeaters that fired round after round without reloading, and the single shot fell behind. Standard issue 1 decade, surplus the next, and finally, scrap. It guarded the territory faithfully, then the territory forgot it entirely. Number 19, the Spencer repeating carbine. Before Winchester ruled the West, this was the repeater that changed war. A tube of cartridges fed through the buttstock, and a lever worked the action, letting one man put out fire that once took a squad. Tens of thousands were built during the Civil War, and when it ended, they flooded west by the wagon load, cheap and available. A prison arming itself on scraps could buy Spencers for a fraction of a new rifle's price. It was already yesterday's technology, but yesterday's technology still stops a man. The Spencer rode the walls long after the Army cast it aside, then outlived its usefulness too, and quietly disappeared. Number 18, the Springfield Model 1873. The rifle soldiers called the trapdoor. Chambered in the hard-hitting .45-70, it was the standard long arm of the United States Army for a generation, and that is why it ended up on prison walls. When the Army upgraded, it dumped its old trapdoors into the surplus market by the tens of thousands, and every sheriff, railroad, and territorial prison went shopping. You flipped up the hinged breech block, loaded 1 fat cartridge, and closed it. The .45-70 hit like a landslide. A guard on a tower did not need speed so much as reach and stopping power. Retired from the cavalry, the trapdoor was retired again when the prisons modernized and few noticed it go. Number 17, the Sharps rifle. The long-range single shot that built its legend on the Buffalo Plains. A rifle that could reach a target most men could barely see. The heavy Sharps, some chambered for rounds so large they were nicknamed the Big 50, dropped men at distances the shorter guns could only dream of. For a guard watching a work gang spread across open ground, that reach mattered. A single well-placed Sharps was a fence made of the threat of accuracy. But it was slow and deliberate in an age racing toward repeaters, and once the faster guns arrived, it became a relic almost overnight, forgotten by the walls it once guarded. Number 16, the Smith & Wesson Schofield. Introduced in 1875, it answered a hard problem. How do you reload a revolver with one hand while the other holds a running horse? Major George Schofield redesigned the Smith & Wesson Model 3 so the frame broke open at a single latch, tipping the barrel down and kicking out all 6 spent shells at once. A trooper could reload in under 30 seconds, half the time a Colt demanded, and the Army bought somewhere around 8,000 to 9,000. On a prison transport across open country, that speed was worth its weight in silver. But it fired a shorter cartridge than the Colt, the ammunition got tangled in the field, and the Army dropped it. Sold off cheap, it passed out of service and out of memory. Number 15. The Merwin Hulbert Revolver. Few guns this fine have vanished this completely. In its day, it was one of the most beautifully machined revolvers in America, with an ingenious twist-open design that ejected the empties and left live rounds in the cylinder. Lawmen who could afford the best carried them with pride. The fit and finish rivaled anything Colt or Smith & Wesson made. But the company slid into trouble and collapsed near the end of the century. And when the maker died, the gun died with it. No factory, no parts, no legacy. It went from a gentleman's prized revolver to a forgotten footnote, retired not by a better gun, but by a bankruptcy. Number 14. The Remington Model, 1875. Remington's bid to unseat the Colt Peacemaker, and a serious gun. Built on the same solid frame and flowing lines as Remington's famous 1858 percussion revolvers, it was rugged, handsome, and dependable, with a distinctive web of metal beneath the barrel. The outlaw Frank James was said to favor a Remington. On a guard's hip, it did everything a Colt did and asked for nothing. But it arrived 2 years after the Peacemaker had already seized the market, and no amount of quality could pry that grip loose. Remington sold what it could, then quietly discontinued the line. A fine revolver, outrun by a head start it could never catch. Number 13. The Colt Model 1877, nicknamed the Lightning in .38 caliber and the Thunderer in .41. Colt's very first double-action revolver. One pull of the trigger, both cocked and fired it. No thumbing the hammer between shots. Fast, compact, and beloved. Billy the Kid was reported to carry a Thunderer, and nearly 167,000 were made. But the 1877 hit a fatal flaw. Its action was a maze of delicate springs, and those springs broke. A gun that failed in the field left a guard holding an expensive club. Prized when it worked and cursed when it did not, the Lightning earned a reputation for unreliability that followed it into retirement. Colt moved on, and the little double action was left to rust. There was nothing simple about arming a frontier prison, and no standard issue. A territorial institution armed itself the way a poor man furnishes a house, with whatever it could get. Army surplus trap doors leaned in the same racks as personal Colts. A guard might carry a company rifle on the wall and his own revolver on his hip. Half the guns were a generation out of date before they arrived, bought second-hand because second-hand was affordable. And everyone shared the same fate written into it from the start. It would serve until the territory ceased to exist, then be sold, scrapped, or forgotten. That is the thread running through this whole list. Now back to the count. Number 12. The Winchester Model 1866. The riflemen called the Yellow Boy for the warm gleam of its brass frame. The first rifle to carry the Winchester name, an improvement on the earlier Henry, and it made the repeating rifle a practical tool of the West. That golden receiver was unmistakable, and the gun was reliable and quick, feeding cartridge after cartridge through its lever. For a wall that needed firepower, a repeater was a leap beyond any single shot. But design moved at a brutal pace. Within a decade, the 1866 was superseded by stronger, steel-framed Winchesters and more powerful rounds. The Yellow Boy that once was the cutting edge became a relic, its brass tarnishing on a forgotten shelf. Number 11. The Winchester Model 1873, so central to the era that history simply calls it the gun that won the West. Chambered in the .44-40 and built on a steel frame with a sliding dust cover, it was everything the Yellow Boy promised and more. And this is not a gun with a loose connection to prison walls. At the Yuma Territorial Prison in Washington, the guards who marched shackled work gangs out to labor carried 44-40 Winchester rifles to keep the prisoners in line. That is the documented reality. This exact rifle in the hands of actual prison guards. It was the workhorse of the frontier, in the saddle, on the wall, at the gallows. And like every workhorse, it was run until the world changed. When smokeless powder arrived, the 1873 was retired, its long service ending in silence. Number 10. The Colt Model 1878. If the 1877 was Colt's fragile first double action, the 1878 was its heavier, sturdier answer. A big-frame revolver in the full power .45 and marketed under the grand nickname Omnipotent. This was a gun for men who wanted double-action speed without the delicacy, muscle to match its ambition. On a trail, escorting a prisoner through country where help was a day's ride away, that muscle was reassurance you could hold in your hand. But it stayed a niche gun, never as popular as the single-action Colt beside it, and Colt let the line lapse. Robust, capable, and quietly dropped, the Omnipotent proved that even a powerful gun could be forgotten. Number 9. The Break-Top Pocket Revolver. The cheap iron typified by makers like Harrington and Richardson. Not every gun on a prison payroll was a frontier legend. Some were just tools, small top-break revolvers in modest calibers, bought by the box because they were affordable and easy to replace. A guard wanted something on his belt as a last resort, for the moment his rifle was slung or his hands were full. Press a latch, the barrel tips down, the empties fly out, reload. Never glamorous, never meant to be. Disposable by design, used up and thrown out, and no one ever wrote their names down, forgotten before they were even gone. Number 8. The Remington Model 95, the Double Derringer. When everything else was out of reach, this was the gun that stayed. Two stubby barrels stacked one over the other, chambered in .41 rimfire, small enough to vanish in a palm. It was not a fighting gun. It held 2 shots and threw them barely across a room. But a guard does not always have the luxury of his rifle. In the close quarters of a cell block, where a full-size revolver was a liability, the little Derringer was insurance measured in inches. Gamblers carried them, lawmen carried them, and men who guarded dangerous prisoners carried them too. Then the shift ended, the gun went into a drawer, and there it was forgotten. Here is the turning point that decides the fate of every gun on this list. The territories did not last. One by one they became states, and when they did, the old territorial prisons were finished. Yuma, overcrowded and boxed in, shipped its prisoners to a new facility at Florence in 1909 and closed its gates. The Wyoming Territorial Prison passed to the new state at statehood in 1890. Its inmates later moved to a modern penitentiary. When a prison goes dark, its armory goes with it. The rifles are auctioned, the revolvers pocketed by departing guards, the heavy guns left to rot where they stood. Statehood was the frontier's funeral, and these weapons were buried alongside it. Now, the final 6. Number 7. The Winchester Model 1887 lever-action shotgun. John Browning's design, and a strange, wonderful thing. A shotgun worked by a lever, like a rifle, throwing heavy loads of buckshot with a swing of the hand. Law enforcement agencies and stagecoach companies carried them, and for good reason. Nothing settled a close-range standoff like the yawning bore of a lever shotgun leveled across a room. For guard work, where the threat was rarely at distance and always personal, it was close to ideal. But Browning himself knew the future belonged to the pump, and within a decade the pump pushed it aside. A brief, fierce moment of relevance, then obsolescence, remembered by almost no one but collectors. Number 6. The Winchester Model 1892. When the frontier needed a lighter, faster lever gun, Browning delivered again. Trim and quick, chambered for the same pistol cartridges as the revolvers on a guard's hip, the 44-40 and its cousins, so a man could feed rifle and pistol from one box of ammunition. That single-caliber convenience had won hearts since the 1873, and the 1892 refined it into something sleeker and stronger. For a mounted guard, or one who wanted a carbine he could swing up in an instant, it was superb. But it arrived just as smokeless powder was about to rewrite every rule of ballistics, and the pistol-caliber lever gun would soon be eclipsed by rifles that shot flatter and hit harder. Number 5. The Winchester Model 1894. This is the rifle that made everything before it obsolete, and almost overnight. Chambered for the new .30-30, it was one of the first sporting rifles built for smokeless powder, and smokeless powder was a revolution. Where black powder guns belched a cloud of smoke that fouled the barrel and marked your position, smokeless burned clean and drove a bullet faster, flatter, and farther. A guard with an 1894 could reach across a distance the black powder rifles could not touch with a lighter, handier weapon. Every single shot and every black powder repeater on this list became yesterday's gun the moment it appeared. And here is the cruel symmetry. The 1894 retired the guns above it, sent them to the surplus racks and scrap heaps. Then time did to the 1894 exactly what it had done to them. The frontier became states and cities, the territorial prisons closed, and the rifle that made everything obsolete was itself retired, and in its turn, forgotten. Number 4. The Colt Single Action Army, the gun the world simply calls the Peacemaker. There is no more iconic sidearm in American history. Introduced in 1873 in the powerful .45 Colt, adopted by the United States Army, carried by lawmen and outlaws and soldiers alike, it became the revolver every other revolver was measured against. On the hip of a prison guard, it was authority made of steel, a gun everyone recognized and respected. From 1877, it was also offered in .44-40, so a guard could match it to his Winchester and carry one cartridge for both. It was the king. And yet the ones that stood watch over the territories met the same end as the humblest breaktop here. When the prisons closed, their peacemakers were not enshrined. They were sold for scrap, traded away, lost in the shuffle of a closing armory. The gun survived as a legend. The revolvers that actually guarded the walls were retired and forgotten like all the rest. Number 3. The coach gun, the short double-barreled shotgun that was the guard's true equalizer. Forget range, forget accuracy, forget elegance. A stubby 10 or 12 gauge with two barrels cut down short, useless past 30 feet and devastating inside it. This is the gun that gave us the phrase riding shotgun, the messenger's weapon, cradled across the knees of the man beside the stagecoach driver. And on a prison wall, in a cell block, at the mouth of a transport wagon, it was exactly right. A single guard with a coach gun controlled a room by his presence alone, because every man in that room understood what those two barrels would do at close range. It did not need to be fired to work. It needed only to be there, level and ready. No serial number pedigree, no collector's romance, no famous owner. Pure, blunt function. And when the prisons that relied on it went dark, it went to a barn, a scrap pile, a forgotten corner, its work finished and its name unrecorded. Number 2, the Winchester Model 1897, the pump-action shotgun the penitentiaries kept close. This was the gun teased at the very start. Browning's pump design let a man fire, rack the slide, and fire again as fast as he could work his arm, and in a short-barreled guard gun or riot gun form, it was among the most fearsome close-range weapons a prison could own. The connection to the walls sits in the collector record. Penitentiaries acquired these guns specifically for guard duty, some so significant that questions about surviving examples still surface among Winchester historians today. Where the coach gun gave you 2 shots, the 1897 gave you a magazine, fired the instant the slide slammed home. It was the weapon that ended a riot before it began. The state kept these locked away, issued them only when things turned grave, and when the old institutions were replaced, those guns were retired behind steel doors and, in time, locked out of memory entirely. Everything on this list has led to one place: the tower. On a frontier prison, the tower was the highest, loneliest, most important post there was. From up there, one guard could see the whole yard, the walls, the work gangs, the horizon a prisoner would have to cross to be free. And the tower did not hold a rifle or a revolver. It held something built to end an escape before it started, a weapon of a completely different order. Every gun on the walls below was a personal tool. The gun on the tower was a statement, mounted in iron, pointed at the yard, meant to be seen and feared. This is the gun that defined the frontier prison. This is number 1. Number 1, the tower battery gun, the crank-fed monster that crowned the Yuma Territorial Prison. Atop the southeast guard tower, built in 1882 over a reservoir carved into the rock, the prison mounted a Lowell battery gun. An improved design descended from the Gatling, reported capable of firing roughly 300 rounds a minute. Against a wall of unarmed men, that rate was almost beyond comprehension. This was not a gun for stopping one runner. It was a gun for stopping a rebellion. And it did. During one break attempt, prisoners rushing the gate shot down the guard working that gun and shot down the officer who ran up to replace him. In the story Yuma still tells, it was the superintendent's own wife who reached the crank and drove the escapees back until order was restored. Nothing on these walls spoke louder. And then the territory became a state. The prison closed its gates in 1909. And the greatest gun it ever mounted was left on its tower in the desert, rusting under the Arizona sun. For decades it sat there, buried in plain sight, until the ruins became a museum and someone finally recognized it for what it was. Buried and forgotten, then found. It all comes back to that tower. A battery gun that could fire 300 rounds a minute, the most powerful weapon a territorial prison ever owned, sat abandoned and unrecognized for years. If that could be forgotten, what chance did the rest have? The rolling blocks and the Schofields, the peacemakers and the coach guns. Everyone stood watch over the territory's most dangerous men, and everyone met the same quiet fate the day the frontier became a state. Retired, sold, scrapped, and forgotten, buried alongside the territories they served. That is the story of frontier justice, not the crime, not the punishment, but the tools, left to rust once the world that needed them was gone. Which one would you have wanted on the wall if you drew the night shift in 1885? Tell me in the comments. And if you made it this far, subscribe, because there is always another forgotten story waiting.